My name is Robert Beatham. I started with the company in 1959 as a marine engineer after I graduated from Maine Maritime Academy. Stayed with the company until 1969. In that time, the company had leased the ships out to the government, and the government was releasing the ships back to the company, so the ships were being turned over to foreign flag. In 1970, I bought the farm here in 1964. My wife was here. I came back here, and I asked for a job in the company. They gave me a job. Not so much pay, but a lot of fringe benefits, shall we say, in 1970. And I stayed from 1970 to 1985 when the company left. They wanted me to go to Puerto Moyes, but I am happy here. Good morning. This morning we're going to talk about the United Fruit Company. The United Fruit Company is known by many names: the Great White Fleet, the Octopus. But we must have a start for everything. So the company has a start. Well, we make the start. There was a Captain Baker many years ago on a sailing ship, and he was taking some miners to Colombia. And coming back, he was empty store. He stopped at Montego Bay in Jamaica, and he picked up these green things. It was a shilling a bunch at that time, and he brought them into Boston with him. Captain Baker sailed out of Boston, and in Boston he found a fruit dealer named Preston, and Preston sold his fruit, and they did a very good price on it. So Mr. Preston asked Mr. Baker, Captain Baker, if he could get some more. So Captain Baker went back and got some more, and they started in 1885. They started the Boston Fruit Company. Now, the Boston Fruit Company basically was out of Jamaica, Montego Bay mainly. And they would bananas. I mean, that was wonderful. And about 1898, they had a big blowdown. A blowdown is when the winds come and it doubles the bananas over. You can harvest maybe a few stems of bananas off what you save, but then it's 6 months again before you start harvesting. So Mr. Preston was very irritated that Captain Baker could not bring him any bananas. So they decided they had to get more area, more territory. So if they had a calamity in one place, they'd still have bananas from another place. Well, they looked around and they found the Snyder Brothers, which is on the east coast of Panama. They found Minor C. Keith, which was building the railroad for his uncle to San Jose, and he'd planted bananas on the right-of-way, and he was selling out of Mobile, Alabama, and he had money problems, just what the company wanted, of course. Excuse me. Then they got another fruit company, the Jamaican Fruit Company, and they merged together. In 1899, they formed the United Fruit Company. And from that time on, if anybody got too big in bananas, like Zamuri did, they just merged with him. They had a monopoly on the market. In the 60s, they had to get rid of the Guatemala division. The United States said they had a monopoly on bananas, and they was pricing the bananas, so they had to get rid of a whole division to make competition against themselves. The company from the very beginning, research department was wonderful. They researched new bananas, new fruits, the rambutan, which we just ate, that came from the company. Many things we owe to the company today. The Great White Fleet, why was it called the Great White Fleet? Because they realized that white ships reflected more heat than the black ships, and they could cool the bananas better. And they started the refrigeration system in the ships, and they brought bananas in, and the company's profit on bananas wasn't very much. But the volume was great. They went into all these countries. Down here it's known as the octopus, el pulpo, okay? It gets into everything. For example, we can only talk about Costa Rica for the moment. In Costa Rica it needed plastics, so it started a plastic company, known as Polymere today, okay? They needed a printing company, so they started Sedco as a big, I don't even know if it still exists anymore. Each division had a name. Our name was the Compañía Bananera Costa Rica. And Honduras, then Presa. In Panama, Cherokee Land Company. Everything went fine. They had a few problems along the way, but we get up into the 70s and then the company started having problems. One of the big problems was it had a great surplus of money in the bank. And these other people saw this surplus and they said, if we can get hold of the stock, that money is ours, okay? The company could buy tractors, they could do anything. There was never a question of the company's credit. So there was Eli Black of Morel Meat, Zapata Offshore, and well drilling company, Zapata. They all started in to get control of the company. Finally, Eli Black got hold of the company, and he changed the name to the United Brands Corporation. From that time, when he got hold of the money, everything got tight. Everything was tight. Mr. Black would come by here, and he would go through and he'd look at a box, for example, and he'd say, Chiquita is painted in blue. How much does it cost a year to paint Chiquita in blue in all these boxes? Of course, nobody had an answer for him, but he'd say, why don't you make the outline in blue? You realize how much money it would save a year? Now, Mr. Black could not spend the interest on his money if he lived on the high hog the rest of his life. But that wasn't enough for him. He went out of the 82nd floor of the Pan American building at 7 o'clock one morning. They never did figure out if he jumped or if he was thrown out or just exactly what happened, but that was the end of Mr. Black. Like I say, very rich man, but he was a failure in his own way because he started with a company, the shares was 75, and when he jumped out the window there was around 15. So he and his friends had lost a lot of money paper-wise. You understand what I mean? Things got hard and tight over the times. There started to be little problems between the country and the company. And 85 was a bad year for bananas. Why I mean a bad year for bananas, there was a glut of bananas on the market. There was more bananas being produced than there was sales for. That often happens if there's not a major disaster in some division. Besides having a glut on the bananas, most of these countries down here started putting an export tax on the box. Some put 50%, 50 US cents, some put 80, some even put $1. Another thing Mr. Eli Black had got involved in is he bribed the president of Honduras to cut this tax down, and they found out about it, and that was another big black mark against Mr. Black. And on top of that, we had a strike in June. It lasted 3 months. So a new man came in as director of the board there was two brothers, I forget their names right now. But he had never seen bananas. He was a financial type person. And he looks at the run sheet. He sees 3 months loss, 3 months strike, 3 months to get back on export again, and then maybe not make a profit. So he said to the government, or they sent a letter to the government, asking the government to take off the export tax until the company was making money. Of course, that didn't go over with the communist people here, and it came out in the papers the next day, transnationalists are trying to dictate policy to the government. They never did come to an agreement. The company finally, we knew it when they asked for a budget to close the division. I mean, the company had a lot of assets, okay? In 1988, it would have been turned over anyway. If it was turned over before that, the company had to turn the railroad, locomotives, the dock, everything, the right-of-way, over to the government. The land belonged to the company. So one day it was, to me, it come down, half of the people in the machine shop leave Saturday. 2 weeks later, half of those left. And then 2 weeks later, we had a little skeleton crew left to tie up things. And the whole company went the same way. The agricultural division was worse than us because they fired almost everybody at once. Because everything had to be done away with. What are we going to do with locomotives? What are we going to do with drag lines? Everything had to be taken up. I say locomotives because what the company did is the company didn't want the railroad. They had no use for it. So they made a deal with the company. They would give so much land in Palmyra because the country has a land shortage for squatters and people like that to give low income houses. So they give all this land in Palmyra to the company, and the company to the government, and the government give them back half the railroad. So some locomotives went to Honduras, some went to Panama, some stayed with the government. A lot of the rolling stock we broke down, like banana cars, we would cut all it off and just leave the bare base of it, because they were using it for containers in Honduras. Most of the drag lines went to other divisions, D4s, D6s, they went to other divisions, but it was a big thing to get everything out, you know what I mean? And the government had to come in and inspect the railroad, which is another long, drawn-out thing. But finally everything got done, and the company closed the Golfito division. Now everybody says the company left Costa Rica. We must understand today the company exports more bananas out of Costa Rica than they ever did out of Golfito. And they're shipped out of Limon, and everything is done by contract. Who won, who lost? The company won, the company lose. Do the people win, the people lose? Now everything is done by contract. The company does not have plantations, they do not have packing stations, schools, hospitals, or nothing like that. They have a quality control, and they go around from packing station to packing station, and they buy these from independent producers with a Chiquita label on it, okay? So I say again, who lost and who won? I think the people lost, okay? Because the company was a giant school. I mean, if you needed a locomotive mechanic, you don't put an advertisement in the paper. You have to take a boy and you have to bring him up over the years, and he's, understand what I mean? Even our car mechanics, Ford used to come down and give courses. Our people were made here, even our chauffeurs and people like that. You'll still find old taxi drivers in San Jose that will say, oh, I started out being a chauffeur for the company in Golfito. I mean, but the company was a giant school. And when the company came here, it put in its own hospitals, its own schools, its own roads. So I still say, we lost. The people, they lost. Because, and the future, I see the future going on the same way. Big nationalistic companies, they are just going to use certain, and they are going to buy the bananas with the label on it, and they go out. Now, Limon is a much better place to go out of than Golfito. Because in Golfito, to get to the west coast where the big banana market is, we have to go through the canal, which is 1 day more. And out of Limon, they zip up there in the most 2 days, okay? Out of Ecuador, the biggest, or used to be the biggest banana producer in the world, I don't know if it still is, but they do all the west coast. So the east coast is the moneymaker, okay? Any questions? Well, there's a lot more you can put in, but you run along and you get into Zamuri.